Broken Heart, my sister-in-law, looked straight at me, her voice sharp like broken glass, and said, "You're not on the $64 million deed." Her words rang in my ears. My knees shook. The closing table was cold beneath my fingertips, and the realtor, a tall man with sharp blue eyes, slid the papers in front of me. He gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his face and asked, "Ready to sign?" My heart stopped. My chest tightened as if someone had chained it with iron. I looked around the room, at my husband, at his sister who smirked with satisfaction, at the attorney whose eyes were suddenly busy studying the ceiling tiles. In that moment, I felt the world spin backward. I wanted to scream. How am I not on the deed? How can $64 million be floating on this table, and I, the wife, the one who carried this family, am erased like chalk in the rain? I wanted to sign. I wanted to fight. But before I could open my mouth, before I could take one breath to speak, something happened that would change everything. And that's where I'll pause, because I need to tell you how it all began. But before I continue, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Margaret, but most people just call me Grandma Maggie. I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. I am 72 years old, and this story you are about to hear is one I never thought I would share with the world. Please, if you're watching or listening, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click that notification button so you don't miss the rest of this unbelievable journey. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which part of the country, or even the world, you're in. Now, let's go back. It all started 3 years ago, on a warm spring morning, when my husband, Richard, walked into our small kitchen with a big smile. The sunlight was pouring through the curtains, and I was baking my famous apple pie. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Maggie, I've got news that will change our lives forever." I thought maybe he meant a cruise trip or maybe retirement plans. But he pulled out a folder, and inside it were blueprints. "Developers want to buy that land my father left us," he explained. "It's not just a deal, it's history. They want to build luxury condos, offices, everything. Maggie, it's worth millions." I laughed, shaking flour off my hands.
Millions?
"Richard, that land was just weeds and old fences when I last saw it." "Yes," he said, gripping my shoulders. "But times have changed. That land is sitting right in the middle of the new tech hub. Maggie, we're about to be rich." I didn't know how to feel.
Rich?
After years of struggling with bills, with me clipping coupons at the grocery store, with us patching the roof ourselves to save money, it didn't sound real. But then came the catch. The land wasn't just his. It was co-owned with his younger sister, Catherine, my sister-in-law. Catherine was the kind of woman who could smile at you while twisting a knife in your back. She lived for appearances, fancy clothes, expensive purses, and a tongue sharp enough to slice through steel. When she heard about the developer's offer, she showed up at our house with a sparkle in her eyes. "We're going to be legends," she declared, sipping on her wine like she already owned the world. But from the beginning, she made one thing clear. "This is family property. It's between Richard and me. Maggie, you're just along for the ride." Her words stung, but Richard waved them off. "Don't mind her, Maggie. Of course you're part of this. You've been by my side all these years." I trusted him. I really did. Months rolled by. Meetings with lawyers, calls with developers, papers shuffled back and forth. Every time I asked about the deed, Richard brushed it aside. "It's all handled. Don't worry." But I did worry, because I saw the way Catherine's eyes lingered on me, the way she smirked when my questions were ignored. Then, the day of the closing came. The $64 million deal. We arrived at the grand office downtown, with shiny glass walls that reflected the city like a mirror. My heart pounded as we stepped into the conference room. The air smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. The table was laid with documents, stacks and stacks of them. Lawyers, realtors, and brokers sat around like vultures waiting for a meal. Catherine leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, her red nails tapping against her wine-colored folder. She looked at me and said the words that froze my blood. "You're not on the deed." I blinked, confused. What do you mean? I'm his wife. This is ours. Her smile was cruel.
No, sweetheart.
The land was in Dad's name. He passed it down to Richard and me. Legally, you don't exist here. You're not signing. You're not owed. You're just watching. I turned to Richard, my husband, my partner of 50 years. His face was pale, his lips tight, but he didn't speak. That's when the realtor slid the documents toward me, almost mocking, and asked, "Ready to sign?" The room went silent. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But before I could say anything, Catherine leaned in closer and whispered something so shocking, so venomous, that my whole body went numb. And that, my dear viewers, is where everything exploded. Catherine leaned toward me, her lips curling like a snake ready to strike, and whispered, "Richard signed you off months ago. He made sure you're not on anything. You have no claim, Maggie. Not a penny." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. The words cut through me sharper than any knife. I felt like the floor had opened under my chair, like I was falling into a bottomless pit. I turned to Richard, my husband, my companion through every storm of life. I expected him to shout, to slam his fist on the table, to defend me. But he just sat there, frozen, eyes glued to the papers in front of him. "Richard?" My voice cracked. "Tell me she's lying." The room grew unbearably still. Even the attorney glanced up, lips pursed, as if waiting for a performance he had already rehearsed. Finally, Richard cleared his throat, but his voice was flat, tired. "Maggie, Catherine's right. The property was inherited. It's legally between the two of us. That's just the way it is." It was like being stabbed, not just once, but again and again, each word another twist of the blade. "But I'm your wife," I whispered. "For 50 years. I worked beside you. I supported you. How can you erase me like this?"
He didn't look at me.
He just rubbed his forehead, as though my pain was an inconvenience. Catherine smirked, leaning back in her chair like a queen who had just conquered her enemy. "Face it, Maggie. You've always been an outsider. Richard knows it. I know it. This is blood property, and you, well, you're nothing but a shadow." My hands trembled. My face burned. I wanted to leap across the table and wipe that smirk off her face. But instead, tears blurred my vision. The realtor coughed politely, trying to drag the meeting back to business. "Shall we proceed with the signing?" he asked, sliding the pen closer. I pushed back my chair, the legs screeching against the polished floor. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Not until I know the truth." The truth. That was all I wanted. How long had Richard been planning this? How long had Catherine been whispering poison in his ear? And why did every person in that room, lawyers, brokers, agents, act like this was normal? I remembered every sacrifice I had made. The nights I stayed awake, sewing clothes to save money. The days I skipped meals so our children could eat. The years I believed that love was stronger than money. And here I was erased. But let me take you back a little, because this didn't start at the closing table. Oh no, the seeds were planted long before that. Years ago, when Richard's father passed away, the will was read in a cramped lawyer's office downtown. I remember the smell of stale coffee and old books. The lawyer said, "The family property will be divided equally between Richard and Catherine." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I believed what was his was mine, what was mine was his. Isn't that what marriage is? One heart, one home, one future. But Catherine always made sure to remind me otherwise. At every family dinner, she would say things like, "This house isn't really Maggie's, you know. It's Dad's gift to us." Richard always laughed it off. "Don't mind her," he'd tell me. "She's just being Catherine." But little did I know, those weren't just jokes. They were warnings. As the years passed, Catherine's power grew. She was single, independent, with no children, and every dollar she earned went into building her influence. She dressed like wealth itself. Pearls, diamonds, the kind of handbags that could pay a month's rent. Meanwhile, I worked quietly, saving, managing, stretching pennies into dollars. Richard and I lived modestly, even after retirement, believing in the future we were building together. And then, when the developers came knocking, Catherine pounced. From the very first meeting, she made herself the center of attention. She spoke for Richard, interrupted me whenever I asked a question, and smiled at the lawyers like she was already one of them. At first, I brushed it off. It doesn't matter who talks the most, I told myself. At the end of the day, Richard will protect me. The air was thick with tension, like the whole room had stopped breathing. Catherine clutched that envelope against her chest as if it were a newborn baby she was protecting, or maybe a ticking bomb she didn't want anyone else to touch. "Give it back," I shouted, my voice trembling with both fear and fury. "Whatever's inside belongs on this table. Everyone deserves to see it." Catherine's eyes blazed. "You don't get to demand anything, Maggie. You're not even on the deed." Her words cut me again, but I refused to flinch this time. I leaned forward across the table, my wrinkled hands steadying me. "Maybe not. But if you're so sure I don't matter, then why are you so desperate to hide what's inside that envelope?" The room grew heavier. The lawyers whispered among themselves. The realtor tapped his pen nervously. Even Richard's hands shook as he rubbed them together. The stranger, the man who had stormed in, took a step closer. His voice thundered. "Those documents prove fraud. And if you don't put them on the table right now, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities."
Fraud.
The word echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. Catherine's face went pale. For once, her mask of confidence cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, but her voice quivered. The man stared her down. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I work for the county records office. And I've been following this case for weeks. What you've done is illegal." My pulse raced. I looked at Richard, praying for him to speak up, to defend me, to defend us. But instead, he buried his face in his hands. "Richard," I whispered, "tell me you didn't tell me you weren't part of this." He didn't answer. That silence was worse than any confession. The man reached for the envelope again, and this time, Catherine didn't resist. Her fingers trembled as she let it go. The thick brown paper slid across the table toward me. My heart pounded in my chest. My fingers shook as I tore the seal open. Inside were copies of legal documents, deeds, amendments, transfers. My eyes scanned the lines, my breath catching with each word. And then I saw it. My name. Crossed out. Not just once. Not just on one paper. But over and over again, like someone had gone through the trouble of making sure I was erased from every possible claim. At the bottom of each page was Richard's signature. My husband's hand. The man I trusted more than anyone. My knees weakened. I gripped the table for balance. You did this," I whispered. Richard looked up at me, tears shining in his eyes. "Maggie, please."
No.
I shouted, slamming the papers down. "Don't you dare beg me now. You cut me out of everything. You let her," I jabbed a finger at Catherine, "treat me like I was nothing. And all this time you knew." Gasps echoed around the table. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. The realtor cleared his throat, but no one dared to speak. Catherine leaned back in her chair, regaining her smugness. "Well, there it is. You wanted the truth, Maggie. Now you have it." Richard made his choice. "Don't look at me like I'm the villain. He did this willingly." I turned to Richard again, my vision blurry with tears. "Tell me why. Tell me why you erased me from our life." His lips trembled. He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, the stranger spoke again. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady, "there's more." I blinked at him, confused. "More?" He nodded and pulled another stack of papers from his briefcase. "It's not just about erasing your name. It's about where the money is going." Catherine shot up from her chair. "Stop right there," she barked. "You have no right to." But he ignored her. He slid the papers toward me, his eyes full of pity. "Look closely, Mrs. Daniels. Look where the $64 million is being transferred." My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. And then, I saw it. Not to Richard's account. Not even to Catherine's. But to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, under a name I had never seen before. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The stranger hesitated. "That, Mrs. Daniels, is what we need to find out. But the evidence suggests it's connected to Catherine. And if Richard signed these willingly, then he may be tied to it as well." The room erupted. Lawyers muttered frantically. Catherine shouted over them, her face red, her voice shrill. Richard slammed his fist on the table, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. And me?
I sat frozen. Numb.
Betrayed beyond measure. I thought the worst pain was being left off the deed. But this was deeper. They weren't just erasing me. They were stealing everything, funneling it into secret accounts, planning a future that didn't include me at all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to collapse. But instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I gathered the papers into my arms, stood tall, and said, "If you think you can erase me, you are very wrong. This marriage, this family, this life, we built it together. And I will not go down quietly." Everyone stared at me. The room had fallen silent again. Even Catherine seemed unsure, her eyes darting nervously toward Richard. For a moment, I felt powerful. For a moment, I believed I could fight back. But then, Richard stood up, and the words that left his mouth cut deeper than every betrayal so far. "Maggie," he said coldly, "maybe it's time you left. You don't belong here anymore." The paper slipped from my hands and scattered across the floor like broken pieces of my soul. And right then I realized I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my very place in the life I thought was mine. "Maggie, maybe it's time you left. You don't belong here anymore." Richard's words hit me harder than any punch could. My husband, the man I cooked for, sacrificed for, prayed for, had just told me I didn't belong in his life. In our life. The papers were still scattered on the floor, mocking me with their black ink and cold signatures. Each page screamed betrayal. Each line shouted that I was invisible. I bent down slowly, my fingers trembling as I picked up one page after another. My tears dotted the paper, leaving small stains on the ink. With every sheet I collected, my anger grew hotter, stronger, until it no longer felt like weakness. I straightened my back and looked around the table. Every face was watching me, some with pity, some with guilt, others with greed. Catherine smirked like she had already won. Richard looked away, shame written all over him. "No," I said firmly, my voice steady now. "I'm not leaving." Catherine rolled her eyes. "Oh, Maggie, don't embarrass yourself. This deal is already in motion. You're not on the deed. You have no say." I turned to her and let out a small laugh. A bitter one. "You've spent your whole life trying to erase me, Catherine. But let me tell you something. You can't erase a woman who built the foundation you're standing on." The lawyers shifted nervously. The stranger from the records office nodded at me like he was silently urging me to fight. I looked at Richard, my voice breaking but still fierce. "I may not be on the deed, Richard, but I am your wife. And under Georgia law, I have rights. Marital rights. Spousal rights. And I promise you, I will fight for them." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the younger lawyers whispered something to his partner, and I caught the words. "She's right." Catherine's face tightened. For the first time, her confidence cracked. But Richard shook his head. "Maggie, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I slammed my hand on the table, startling everyone. "Don't you dare tell me about hard, Richard. Hard was raising our children while you traveled for work. Hard was keeping food on the table when money was tight. Hard was staying up at night sewing and praying and believing in a future with you. And this," I pointed at the papers, "this betrayal is the hardest thing I've ever faced. But I will not bow down. Not to you. Not to her. Not to anyone." The room went silent. I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears. The realtor cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should pause the signing until.
No.
Catherine snapped. We're finishing this today. This deal is closing. But the stranger from the records office shook his head. Not if fraud is involved. I have enough here to stop this deal cold. And if you think I won't take it to the authorities, you're mistaken. The word authorities sent a chill through the room. Suddenly, everyone sat straighter. The lawyers flipped their files open, whispering frantically to one another. The realtor paled, as if realizing his commission might be slipping away. Richard buried his face in his hands again. I stood taller, holding my ground. For the first time in that entire nightmare, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. But that power came with a cost. Because when Catherine realized the room was slipping away from her, she did something no one expected. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. "Hello? It's me," she said, her voice icy. "Initiate Plan B."
Now.
My heart froze. Plan B? Everyone stared at her. Even Richard looked confused. "Catherine, what are you talking about?" She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her purse, her red lips curling into a satisfied smile. "If I can't have this deal my way, then none of you will." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the lights in the building flickered. And then everything went black. The conference room plunged into darkness. Papers rustled, chairs scraped, voices rose in panic. I heard someone shout, "What's happening?" Another screamed, "The power's out." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just an accident. Catherine had planned something. Something far worse than keeping me off the deed. And in that pitch-black room, surrounded by strangers, betrayal, and $64 million on the line, I realized the fight had only just begun. The room was swallowed by darkness. The polished table that once gleamed now vanished into black. Voices overlapped, fearful, angry, confused. Someone knocked over a glass. I heard it shatter across the floor. "Stay calm," one of the lawyers shouted, but his own voice trembled. My heart raced. I gripped the arm of my chair, my mind spinning. Catherine's words echoed in my head. Plan B.
Now.
I knew this wasn't some random blackout. She had planned it. She had pulled a string, and now we were all caught in her game. Then, a dim emergency light flickered on in the corner of the room, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Everyone's faces looked ghostly in the glow. Catherine stood tall at the end of the table, her silhouette sharp against the faint light. She looked calm, too calm, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "What did you do?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She smirked. "Relax, Maggie. This is just a small inconvenience. Nothing you need to worry about. Except maybe what comes next." Richard jumped up from his chair, his voice rising. "Catherine, enough of this. What are you playing at?" But she ignored him. Instead, she snapped her fingers. And then, as if on cue, the door to the conference room burst open. Two men in black suits stepped inside. Broad shoulders, stone faces. They carried sleek black briefcases and moved with a kind of confidence that made my stomach twist. The lawyers went silent. The realtor's face turned white. One of the men set his briefcase on the table and opened it with a sharp click. Inside were stacks of documents, neatly bound. He pulled the first file out and slid it across the table toward Catherine. "Everything's ready," he said in a deep, emotionless voice. Catherine's smirk widened. She glanced at me, her eyes glinting with triumph. "You see, Maggie, Plan B is simple. If you or anyone else tries to stand in my way, I bring in my own team, my own lawyers, my own contracts. This deal will close one way or another. And you." She leaned closer, her perfume thick in the air. "You'll be nothing but a memory." A memory. The word chilled me to the bone. I clenched my fists under the table. "You can try to erase me, Catherine, but memories don't disappear that easily. Not when they're carved into 50 years of marriage. Not when they're written in blood and sacrifice." Richard finally found his voice. "Catherine, this has gone too far. Bringing in outsiders? Threatening Maggie? This isn't what Dad wanted." She turned on him, her expression hard. Don't you dare talk about Dad. You think he'd want his land split with her? With someone who never carried his blood? She jabbed a manicured finger at me. This property was meant for us. And us alone. Her words sliced through me, but I refused to cry this time. Instead, I looked at Richard, desperate. And what about you? Am I nothing to you too? After everything we built? He didn't answer. He just lowered his head, shame swallowing his face. The stranger from the records office slammed his palm on the table. Enough. Catherine, you can't just strong-arm your way through this. I have enough evidence to expose everything you've been hiding. You think those men intimidate me? Try explaining this fraud to a judge. Catherine's smile faltered, but only for a moment. She tilted her head, studying him. You're a brave man. But bravery doesn't pay bills. Power does. The two men in suits closed the briefcase and stepped back to her side, silent, looming like shadows. The room buzzed with tension. My chest tightened as I tried to steady my breath. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But then, something inside me shifted. I had spent the entire day feeling erased, powerless, unwanted. But watching Catherine flaunt her arrogance, watching Richard sink into silence, something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly, my chair screeching against the floor. My voice shook, but it carried. You think you're untouchable, Catherine. But you've made one mistake. You underestimated me. Her eyes narrowed. What are you babbling about now? I pointed at the documents the stranger had brought, the ones that showed the offshore accounts. These papers are already proof enough. Proof of fraud. Proof of deceit. Proof that this entire deal stinks of corruption. And if you think I won't use them, you're dead wrong. Gasps rippled around the table. Catherine's face darkened. You wouldn't dare. I leaned closer, my voice low but sharp. Try me. For a split second, fear flickered in her eyes. Just a flash, but I saw it. And then, before anyone could say another word, the emergency light flickered again and went out. This time, the darkness was complete. Not a shadow, not a glimmer, nothing but pitch black. And then, from the far side of the room, a scream pierced the air.
High. Sharp.
Terrifying. Someone had been hurt. The scream cut through the blackness like a knife. Sharp, chilling, filled with terror. Who was that? Someone shouted. Chairs scraped. Papers flew. In the dark, I could hear people stumbling, bumping into the table, knocking things over. My heart thudded so loudly, I thought it would burst through my chest. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Richard? I called out. Are you there? No answer. Catherine? My voice wavered. Silence. The stranger from the records office yelled, Someone get a light. Now. As if answering his plea, a small glow flickered from the corner. Someone had lit the flashlight on their phone. The pale beam cut through the dark, shaky, but enough to reveal part of the room. The sight made my stomach twist. Catherine was on the floor, clutching her arm. Blood seeped through the sleeve of her expensive silk blouse, staining it deep red. Her face was twisted in pain, but her eyes burned with fury. The room erupted into chaos. Oh my God, she's bleeding, one of the lawyers cried. Call 911, another shouted. The men in suits rushed to Catherine's side, blocking her from view. One of them growled at the room, No one leaves until we know what happened. Panic rose around the table. The realtor pressed himself against the wall, white as a sheet. The younger lawyer fumbled with his phone, his hands trembling. And me? I just stood frozen, my body trembling. Catherine wounded. The woman who had tried to erase me from existence, who had humiliated me, betrayed me, and laughed in my face, was now the one bleeding on the floor. For a brief moment, I felt an ugly thought creep in. Is this karma? Is this justice? But the sight of the blood snapped me back. No matter what she had done, no one deserved this. I forced my voice to steady. What happened? Who did this? Catherine's head whipped toward me, her face pale, but her eyes blazing like fire. You, she spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. It was you. Gasps filled the room. Every head turned toward me. My knees buckled.
What? No, I didn't.
You were right next to me when the lights went out, she shouted, her voice breaking with pain, but still sharp as glass. You had the papers in your hands.
You attacked me. Admit it.
I didn't. My voice cracked. I swear I never touched you. Richard finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Maggie, tell me the truth. I turned to him, my eyes burning. You think I'd hurt her? After everything she's done, after everything you've done, you think I'd turn violent? He didn't answer. He just looked at me, doubt flickering in his eyes. That doubt cut deeper than Catherine's accusation. The stranger from the records office stepped forward, his face grim. This isn't an accident. That wound, it's a cut. Someone used a blade. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at one another. Fear, suspicion, and rage swirled in the air like smoke. Catherine groaned, clutching her arm tighter. Arrest her, she hissed. She did it. She's been out to destroy me since the moment she walked in. One of the suited men glared at me, his hand hovering near his jacket pocket. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might pull a weapon. I raised my hands, my voice trembling but loud. I didn't do this, but I swear I'll find out who did. The stranger nodded at me, his jaw tight. Then we need to check the lights.
Somebody wanted the blackout.
Somebody wanted this chaos. But before we could move, before we could breathe, the emergency lights flickered back on, flooding the room with harsh, white light. And that's when I saw it. Lying under the table, half hidden by the fallen papers, was a small silver knife. Blood smeared across its blade. And next to it, a folded piece of paper with my name written on it. The silver knife glinted under the harsh emergency lights. Blood stained its blade, and right beside it lay a folded paper, my name scrawled across the front in bold black ink. Maggie. The sound of Richard's voice cut through the silence, low and uncertain. He stared at the note like it was a bomb waiting to go off. One of the suited men snatched the knife up with a cloth, holding it carefully. His eyes narrowed at me, suspicion sharp as a blade itself. Convenient, isn't it? Weapon on the floor. Blood on it. And a note with your name right beside it. I didn't put it there. I cried, my throat tight. I swear I've never even seen that knife before. Catherine groaned from the floor, clutching her bleeding arm, her face twisted in pain. But her eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, never left me. She's lying, she hissed. She planned this. She wanted me out of the way. The room buzzed with whispers. The lawyers exchanged nervous glances. The realtor looked like he wanted to run out the door but was too scared to move. The stranger from the records office stepped forward, his voice steady. Let her open the note. Whatever's inside might explain this. All eyes turned to me. My hands trembled as I reached down and picked it up. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of the entire room's judgment. Slowly, I unfolded it. My breath caught. Inside were just 5 words, written in jagged, rushed handwriting. You're next. Watch your back. Gasps echoed around the table. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," another whispered. What does that mean? I felt my knees weaken. My heart hammered against my ribs. The note wasn't just a threat, it was a setup. Someone wanted me framed. Someone wanted me silenced. I looked up at the room, my voice shaking but loud. This isn't from me. It's to me. Someone wants to make it look like I'm the villain, but I'm not. Don't you see? I'm the target. The suited man holding the knife frowned, uncertain now. The younger lawyer leaned over to see the note and muttered, "She's right. Why would she write a warning to herself?" But Catherine wasn't giving up. Her face pale, her body trembling, she still managed to sneer. Don't believe her lies. She's clever. She wants pity. She wants to twist this, so we all think she's innocent. But the knife doesn't lie. The blood doesn't lie. Richard stood up, his hands shaking. Enough. Everyone stop. His voice cracked like thunder in the room. For a brief moment, everyone fell silent. He turned to me, his eyes wet. Maggie, I want to believe you. God knows I do. But how do we explain this? The knife, the note, the blackout, Catherine's wound. It all points to you. Tears blurred my vision. Richard, I whispered, my voice breaking. If you can't believe me after 50 years of marriage, then what do I have left? The words hung heavy in the air. The stranger stepped between us, his face grim. There's only one explanation. Someone here orchestrated this blackout, planted the knife, and wrote that note. And if we don't find out who it is, it won't just be Catherine bleeding next time. Someone else could die. The room froze. Every face stiffened. Every breath felt sharp. The silence was suffocating. And then, suddenly, another scream shattered the air. This one deeper, louder, filled with raw terror. Everyone spun toward the sound. It wasn't Catherine this time. It was Richard. He was clutching his chest, gasping for breath, his face drained of color. His knees buckled, and before anyone could reach him, he collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. The sound of Richard's body hitting the floor thundered in my ears. Richard, I screamed, rushing forward, my knees scraping the cold tile as I fell beside him. His eyes were wide, his lips pale, his chest heaving like every breath was a war he was losing. The room exploded into chaos. Call 911 again, someone shouted. The younger lawyer dropped to his knees, fumbling to check Richard's pulse with shaking fingers. He's alive, barely. We need help now. I grabbed Richard's hand, tears streaming down my face. Stay with me? Please, don't you dare leave me like this. His lips parted. His voice was weak, broken. Maggie, his eyes darted toward Catherine, then back at me. Not what it looks like. And then his head lolled back, his breathing ragged. My heart shattered.
No, no, no.
Don't you close your eyes, Richard. You fight. The men in suits tried to pull me back, but I fought them off. Catherine, still holding her bleeding arm, smirked through her pain. How poetic, she sneered. The cheating husband, collapsing at the signing table. Maybe guilt finally caught up to him. Her cruelty burned hotter than fire in my chest. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was a monster, but all I could focus on was Richard. The stranger from the records office barked, "Clear the space. Give him air." He knelt beside Richard and pressed down on his chest.
1, 2, 3.
His arms pumped hard, his face set with determination. Come on, old man. Don't let her win. Her. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. Did he mean Catherine? Did he already suspect what I was starting to fear, that this wasn't just a heart attack? Because Richard's collapse didn't feel natural. The blackout, the knife, the note, Catherine's wound. And now Richard. This wasn't coincidence. This was war. As the stranger continued Sieper, the younger lawyer leaned close to me, his voice trembling. Do you think someone poisoned him? The thought made my stomach twist. Poison. It would explain everything. The sudden collapse, the weakness in his voice, the way he'd tried to warn me. But who? And why now? My eyes darted to the water glasses on the table. Richard's glass sat half empty, a faint lipstick smear that wasn't mine staining the rim. Catherine's lipstick. I felt my blood run cold. Before I could speak, the paramedics stormed through the doors, pushing people aside. They rushed to Richard, shoving us back. I watched helplessly as they worked on him, attaching wires, pushing oxygen, lifting him onto the stretcher. Is he going to be okay? I begged, grabbing one of their arms. We'll do everything we can, ma'am, the medic said firmly before they wheeled him out. And just like that, Richard was gone, rushed into the night, leaving me surrounded by enemies and suspicion. Catherine's laughter rang out, sharp and cruel. Even wounded, even with blood soaking her silk blouse, she managed a twisted smile. Looks like the deed signing will be delayed.
Shame.
I was really looking forward to watching you lose everything tonight. My hands shook, my nails digging into my palms. You did this, I whispered. Her eyes glittered with wicked delight. Prove it. The room went still. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. The realtor bit his lip. The men in suits stood rigid, watching me like hawks, and the stranger from the records office studied me with quiet intensity, as if waiting to see what I would do next. My chest heaved. My mind raced. Richard's life hung in the balance, and Catherine had just declared war in front of everyone. But before I could speak, before I could fight back, one of the suited men received a call. He answered quickly, listened, then paled. He turned to the room, his voice grave. They found Richard's car outside, and the brakes were cut. The words slammed into me like a hammer. The brakes were cut. Gasps rippled through the room. The lawyers exchanged terrified glances. The realtor backed toward the wall, as though he could melt into it and disappear. Even the paramedics' fading sirens outside seemed to echo those dreadful words. Cut brakes. Not an accident. Not fate. A deliberate attempt to kill Richard. And if he hadn't collapsed inside this room, if he had left earlier, driven away, I covered my mouth, my stomach churning. He would already be dead. The suited man who broke the news shoved his phone into his pocket, his face grim. Someone in this room orchestrated this. Don't fool yourselves. This wasn't random. My pulse hammered in my ears. My eyes darted from face to face. Catherine's cruel smirk, the lawyer's pale, nervous expressions, the stranger's steady gaze. Every person here was a suspect. And somehow, I knew I was the one who would be blamed. Catherine let out a sharp laugh, her wounded arm pressed against her side. Oh, how perfect. Maggie comes back after all these years, and suddenly knives, poison, and sabotaged cars appear out of nowhere. Tell me, do any of you actually believe this is coincidence? She turned to the room, her voice dripping venom. It's her. It's always been her. She wants revenge. She wants Richard's fortune. She wants me gone. And she'll kill anyone who gets in her way. My chest tightened. You're lying. My voice cracked, but I forced it louder. I loved Richard. I still do. I'd never hurt him. Never. You're the one who's been scheming, Catherine. You're the one who wanted me erased from the deed. Admit it. But she only smirked wider. Prove it. That phrase again. Those two words, sharp and poisonous, echoing like a taunt. The stranger from the records office stepped forward, his tone steady. Everyone calm down. We're not pointing fingers until we have evidence. The blackout, the knife, the note, the cut breaks, they're all connected. And if we don't find the truth soon, someone else will end up on the floor. His words silenced the room. For a moment. Then the younger lawyer, trembling, whispered, "What if she's right? What if Maggie really did plan this?" My heart stopped. I turned toward him slowly, disbelief in my eyes. You think I would risk my husband's life? You think I would poison him, stab Catherine, cut brakes, just to sign a piece of paper? The young man swallowed hard, guilt flickering across his face, but he didn't answer. The silence was unbearable. My whole body shook with rage and grief. My voice cracked as I looked around the table. 50 years of marriage, 50 years of loyalty, and in one night, you all believe I'm capable of murder? Shame on you. Shame on every single one of you. Catherine smirked like a queen watching her rival crumble. The stranger's eyes lingered on me. If Maggie is being framed, then whoever's behind this is smart. And dangerous. He turned to the group, but they slipped up. Poison leaves traces. The knife will have prints. And the brakes, whoever cut them had to get close. We'll find them. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe someone believed me. But that hope shattered in the very next moment. The older lawyer, who had been quiet all evening, suddenly stood up. His face pale, his hands shaking. I can't stay silent anymore. Everyone turned to him. He looked straight at me, his voice cracking. Maggie, it was your name on the account used to pay for the car mechanic. The one who cut the brakes. The room exploded in gasps. My head spun. My name? On the account? My vision blurred as my knees buckled, the floor tilting beneath me. And then his final words crashed into me like thunder. You paid for your husband's death. You paid for your husband's death. The words slammed into me like a thunderclap. My chest tightened, and the room spun around me. I clutched the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. No, I whispered, my voice trembling. That's not true. I couldn't. But the lawyer's face was grim, his hands shaking as he held up a folder. We have the receipts. The mechanic was paid in cash, but the account used to withdraw the money is registered in your name, Maggie. The papers slapped onto the table, sliding across the polished wood. My name, printed in black ink, glared up at me like a curse. Catherine's laughter rang out, sharp and cruel. Even bleeding, even pale from her wound, she found strength in my pain. Well, Maggie. Looks like the loving wife finally showed her true colors. You came back for revenge, didn't you?
Admit it. No.
I shouted, tears streaming down my face. My voice shook, but I forced it louder. That's not my account. I've never seen it before. Someone forged my name. The stranger from the records office picked up the papers, his eyes scanning every line. His jaw tightened. She's telling the truth. The room froze. Catherine's smirk faltered. What are you talking about? He flipped the page around for everyone to see. Look closely. The handwriting on the signature isn't consistent. The G in Maggie is looped differently. The bank stamp is smudged. Whoever created this account wanted it to look real, but it's sloppy. A forgery. Gasps filled the air. The younger lawyer leaned closer, his face pale. So, she didn't pay the mechanic? The stranger's voice was steady.
No.
She's being framed. My breath caught. Relief flooded me, but it was tangled with fear. If someone went this far, poison, knives, cut breaks, forged accounts, then they weren't just after Richard. They were after me, too. But who? Before I could ask, the older lawyer slammed his hand on the table. Then who did it? Who forged the account? Who tried to kill Richard? The room buzzed with tension. And then, Catherine's voice cut through the noise like glass.
Calm.
Cold. Dangerous. Check my husband's accounts. Every head snapped toward her. Richard's accounts. My heart stuttered. What are you talking about? Her lips curved into a chilling smile. Oh, Maggie. Sweet, naive Maggie. Did you really think Richard was innocent in all this? Did you think he loved you enough to protect you? I shook my head, trembling. No, you're lying. But her voice only grew sharper. He was planning to cut you out long before today. He opened secret accounts. He moved money. He bought loyalty. And when you came back, when you threatened to take what he built with me, he made sure the knife would be waiting for you. The room erupted in gasps. No, I whispered again, clutching my chest. My heart felt like it was splitting in two. Not Richard. He tried to warn me. The stranger cut in, his voice firm. She's twisting this. Richard may have secrets, but that doesn't mean he staged his own collapse. Someone poisoned him. Someone cut the brakes. And if we don't find out who, he won't be the only one who dies. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at one another, suspicion burning in their eyes. The lawyers. The realtor.
The suited men.
Catherine. Even the stranger. And then, suddenly, the lights flickered again. My heart lurched. Not again. The room plunged into darkness. A scream tore through the air, louder, more chilling than any before. This time it wasn't Catherine. It wasn't Richard. It came from right behind me. I spun around in the pitch black, my breath caught in my throat. My trembling hand reached out, searching for anything, anyone. And then I felt it.
Warm. Vet.
Sticky.
Blood.
And when the lights blazed back on, the younger lawyer lay on the floor, eyes wide open, his throat slashed from ear to ear. And clutched in his lifeless hand was another folded note. This one with 3 words scrawled across it in the same jagged handwriting as before. Maggie did this.